بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. For today we continue about the life of Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiyallahu anhu. The influence on Abdullah ibn Zubayr was from a number of directions. Firstly, we spoke about his father and his father's bravery. That was Zubayr ibn al-Awam radiyallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ said about Zubayr radiyallahu anhu that لِكُلِّ نَبِيٍّ حَوَارِي وَحَوَارِي الزُّبَيْرِ. Hawari is the term used for the close assistants and disciples of Isa alayhi salam. They're very well known. So the Prophet ﷺ used that and said that every prophet has some Hawariyin, has these close disciples. My Hawari is Zubayr. He only said that about him, and this hadith related by Imam Muslim. So his father is Zubayr. His mother is Asma binti Abi Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anha, a very brave woman from a young age. His aunt is Asma radiyallahu anha's sister Aisha radiyallahu anha, the beloved wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a great scholar and great muhadditha, and very close to the Prophet ﷺ, had learned so much from which he imparted to Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiyallahu anhu. It doesn't stop there. Obviously his grandfather was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. And his mother, the wife of his mother, actually he was a cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. Zubayr radiyallahu anhu was a cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. So his Zubayr radiyallahu anhu's mother is the aunt of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Safiya binti Abdul Muttalib. And again, another very brave woman. Safiya radiyallahu anha, she was a very brave woman, known for her bravery as well. So that is Zubayr radiyallahu anhu's mother. So that is Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiyallahu anhu's grandmother from his father's side. So now you can see how in many directions this bravery, this piety and everything is coming to Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiyallahu anhu. Unfortunately, the same influence wasn't to his other brothers. For example, his brother, whose name was Amr ibn Zubayr ibn al-Awam, he was not the same. We'll learn about him a bit later. Regarding Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiyallahu anhu, a kind of a profile that some of the biographers and historians have provided is that he wasn't very tall, he didn't look very strong and built as such. In fact, he was quite frail and not very tall. There was always a sign of prostration on his forehead, the mark of prostration on his forehead. Extremely high aspiration, just willing to go and do what he thought was correct and right. Extremely high aspirations, very brave, very sharifun nafs, meaning very noble hearted. And he didn't have much hair on his face, just naturally, a sparse beard. And the beard that he had was yellowish, he had a yellowish tinge, and he had long hair. But just very high aspiration, just ready to take on anybody. He is also considered to be one of the 4 famous jurists that are all called Abdullah. So he's one of the 4 Abadillah. Abadillah is the plural of Abdullah, along with Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Umar, and Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anhu. So he's the 4th one. He was a jurist. And there's no doubt that his training came from Aisha radiyallahu anha. And you'll see through certain incidents how beloved he was to Aisha. Aisha radiyallahu anha didn't have any children. And she had literally kind of adopted him in a sense. Looked after him, taught him, and she was always looking out for him. The other thing about Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiyallahu anhu is that he was very, very pious and always focused on worship. So, and he wouldn't leave worship even in later years when he would be in the middle of a battle with somebody. He would be making salat sometimes. So he's really focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. During his time, the haram became flooded and the waters reached to a higher level. So he swam around the Kaaba in tawaf. So he's probably one of the first to do tawaf around the Kaaba swimming in Islam. He was so focused in his worship and his concentration was so intense that one day a snake fell from the roof. His small child was sitting next to him in salat, and he's engrossed in his prayer, and the snake winds itself around the child, and the whole family makes a big fuss about it, big loud noise. They catch the snake, they separate it, they kill the snake, and he's just in his salat. And when he finishes, he only realized afterwards what had happened. That's also a depiction of how Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu's salat used to be. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when he used to pray, the birds used to perch on his shoulders. They say that there are three things in which Abdullah ibn Zubayr could not be surpassed. So in three things he could not be surpassed. One was worship. Number two was bravery. And number three was eloquence. So he's a very eloquent speaker. So he had three great qualities, both spiritual and worldly: bravery and eloquence. Perfect combination for a perfect commander, politician, in a positive sense. The word politician is very negative, unfortunately. So that's why. And worship. In fact, on one occasion, when the Muslims were fighting against the Berbers in North Africa, which they took bit by bit. So they were fighting against the Berber tribes there. And since it's very far from Medina Munawwara, during Uthman radiallahu anhu's time, once the news stopped coming for a while. So, they would always send some news. The leader there was Abdullah ibn Sa'd radiallahu anhu. He would always send some information back, just telling Uthman radiallahu anhu what had happened. But for some time, this news had stopped. So Uthman radiallahu anhu, he sent, Ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu was sent actually by the Muslim army back to Uthman radiallahu anhu to inform them about what was going on. So he came and he told Uthman radiallahu anhu. Now Uthman radiallahu anhu said that, why don't you go and tell everybody, stand on the minbar and you inform everybody and you relate to them, you explain to them what's been happening. So he stood up there and the Muslims gathered. The Muslims of Medina gathered to hear about these campaigns that were being fought in North Africa. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu begins to speak, and suddenly on one side he sees that his father is listening, Zubayr radiallahu anhu. So he's a bit overawed by his father. So you can see that he's affected by this. So his father just makes a signal with his eye, gestures with his eye that no, carry on. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu regains his composure and he finishes. And when he finished, his father calls him and says, Wallahi laka anni asma'u khutbata Abi Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu hina sami'tu khutbatak ya bunayya. Wallahi, I was actually thinking that I'm listening to Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu's khutbah when I was listening to you, O my son. So they say that he was, in fact, his hand gestures, the way he used to speak, and everything was like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. So that's just the way it was, and his father was just quite impressed, quite taken aback that, wow, this is just like his maternal grandfather Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. So from his paternal side he got bravery. From his maternal side he got the piety as well. They say that among the Qurayshi Arabs, Muslims, three people were extremely eloquent, powerful, convincing speakers. One was Muawiyah radiallahu anhu and his son. Another one is Sa'id and his son. And the third is said to be Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu. Now in the battle, Uthman radiallahu anhu sent him. When he got to North Africa, where Abdullah ibn Sa'd radiallahu anhu was fighting these campaigns, As soon as the Muslim army there saw Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anh arrive, they started to make takbir loudly, and a big cry went up. So Jarjir, who was their opponent from the Romans had North Africa, he became a bit perturbed. He said, what happened? He said, oh, there's a reinforcement, an army has come to support the Muslims. So he looked around and he discovered that this was a very interesting setup. The Muslims in the Muslim army there, they used to fight until Dhuhr, and then they used to retire, and the Romans used to retire for the day. And they used to both rest until the next day. And then they used to start fighting again until Dhuhr, and it went on like that for days and days and days. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu felt that this is not worth doing it this way. The other thing he noticed that he couldn't see the commander, he couldn't see the Amir of the forces, Abdullah ibn Sa'd. So where's he gone? He said, oh, he's in his tent. So he went there and he discovered that what had happened was this Jarjir had made this announcement that anybody who comes to me with the head of Abdullah ibn Sa'd, then I will give him my daughter in marriage, and I will give him 100,000 dinars. 100,000 dinars is a lot of money. 20 dinars is about 2,000 pounds nowadays. So you're talking a lot of money. So Abdullah ibn Sa'd radiallahu anh was a bit frightened. So he was kind of staying out of the limelight as such. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, he said, there's no need for you to do that. You go and make an announcement that anybody who brings the head of Jarjir, anybody who finishes him off, then he will get that much, and he will be married to the daughter of Jarjir, and he will also be made Amir over that area. So, up the reward. Now he made that announcement. So Jarjir became even more frightened than what Abdullah ibn Sa'd was. Then Ibn Zubayr radiallahu anh said that we need to change the strategy. The reason is that they're in their lands. They keep getting reinforcement. They can go on for years because this is their land. It extends into their lands. They've got a lot of supplies. We are very far from our mainland, and we can't go on like this for too long. So the strategy needs to change. So what he decided was that what we'll do one day is that since we've got this setup of Dhuhr, everybody has to retire, we'll push it. What he did was he had a select group of armed men from his side, soldiers, to stay back and not go and fight that day. He said, you guys rest. He sent the other part out as normal, and at Dhuhr, as they were wanted to retire, he pushed on and he said to the Romans, no, you can't. We need to really, fight on today. So he forced them to fight until they were extremely tired. Because when you're used to a certain routine, then you get tired. It's a daily thing they were doing, like daily job, going to the job. So they got really tired until eventually when they both became weary after a while, the Romans went and put down their arms and everything, and the Muslims came back and they were very tired as well. So this is when Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anh went with those who had stayed behind, who were all fresh, and he went and right into the thick of them and attacked them. Even though they were less, they routed them. Now because they were managed to root them, Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anh also killed Jarjir. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anh had Jarjir, he killed him himself. And then after that they went and besieged, because this was outside of their main city. So when they had routed them and killed many of them were killed on that day, then they went and besieged the city, and eventually that was taken, and the booty that came out of there was immense. According to the historians, they say that they had there things that the Muslims had never seen before. So numerous things that they received in booty. So now for every cavalry, every horseman from the Muslim, just from that area, just from that city alone, the share, because the way it works is that whoever has taken part, then the one who's on horse, he gets more than the one who's on foot. So each horseman got 3,000 dinars. That was the share. That's how much booty came out of that place. And each infantry person, the one who's just on foot, they got 1,000 dinar. That's a lot of money when you do the math there. That was just from the first city, and then after that, a number of other cities were taken, and then after that, many of the others were actually taken just by agreement, by peace, that they just agreed to come under the Muslim rule. So eventually, the whole of North Africa came under the Muslim rule like that. And Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu an got the daughter of Jarjir in his portion. When he went back to Medina Munawwara and explained what had happened, this was actually the first time that he became known. So until then, he was normal young person that was fighting and that was worshipping and all the rest of it. But after this is when he became known about his mastery and his genius in these matters. The other thing to his name was that when Uthman radiallahu anhu's time, during Uthman radiallahu anhu's final days, he was one of those, along with Hassan and Hussein and others radiallahu anhum, that had defended and that had guarded Uthman radiallahu anhu. And in fact, when Uthman radiallahu anhu, as we discussed earlier, he tried to send everybody away and he refused to have anybody defend. Abdullah ibn Zubayr said, let us take care of these people. But Uthman radiallahu anhu refused. And eventually Uthman radiallahu anhu told everybody to leave. But the two people that absolutely insisted until the last and stayed on with him were Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu and Marwan ibn al-Hakam. The Marwan that we keep saying, those two, they stayed with him. Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu was wounded quite a bit in this. In fact, he had to be carried out. So he was carried out in the wounded with more than 10 wounds on his body. So he's a person who was willing to go to extremes to defend the truth. He was also in the incident of the camel, the battle of the camel with his aunt Aisha radiallahu anha. And again in that he was wounded as well. In fact, he became so wounded in that is that he just about survived. And Aisha radiallahu anha thought that he had died because somebody had said that he had been martyred. And when eventually somebody came and gave her the glad tidings that no, he's still alive, she was so happy at this news that she gave the person who came and gave her the announcement, gave her this information, she gave him 10,000 dirhams as a gift for just bringing her this good news. This is something we don't do anymore. When somebody brings you good news, this was a tradition in that time, that they used to give them a gift, the bringer of the good news. We just treat them like just a messenger. That it's his job anyway, he just came and brought the news anyway. But they used to get, like Ka'b radiallahu anhu, when if you remember, when for 40 days nobody spoke to them. And they got, he and two others, because they had not joined in the expedition of Tabuk. And eventually when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the revelation, like that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forgiven them and accepted their tawbah and repentance, the person who came to him to inform him about this revelation, Ka'b radiallahu anhu was so excited, he had nothing to give him. So he took off the only shirt on his back and he gave him that. He said, I had nothing else, but that was the only thing I had. I gave him that. He was so, he was just so happy about that. So that's something, that's a sunnah it seems, that, to give the bearer of the glad tidings, the messenger as such. So next time somebody brings you some good news, think about it. Give him the keys of your car. I mean, subhanAllah, somebody Sahaba would do that. The horse that they were riding or whatever, I mean, that's the way it was. I mean, it's not that easy these days, is it? Then, because he was extremely young during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, Prophet ﷺ didn't allow young children to go in the battle. So although he was with Abdullah, he was with his father Zubayr radiallahu anhu during the battle of Yarmouk, which we spoke about last time, he wasn't able to fight himself. But at the end, when they were the wounded, he helped to look after them and to tend to them. After that, this is, he was a young boy, but because he was born just at migration, he's as old as the calendar as such. That's how old he would be, approximately. So during Muawiyah radiallahu anhu's time, he took part in many of the expeditions. So further of North Africa, the area of Susa, I think, which is maybe in Tunisia today, that was conquered by Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu himself. So with Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, he went on a number of expeditions. He was also in the famous Constantinople one with Yazid. So Yazid was at the head of that. which Muawiyah radiallahu anhu had sent. And this was something that had been spoken about by a prophecy by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Constantinople and Cyprus would be conquered. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu was there. This is when they went towards the area which is called Turkey now. Istanbul was not conquered at that time. It was conquered much later by one of the Uthmanis. But they got to the borders of that. And in that army were many Sahaba. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiallahu anhu was with them. And he eventually died there, and that's why he's buried there. And that's why one of the suburbs of Istanbul today is called Ayyubiya, where he is buried. Along with them was Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. And Hussein radiallahu anhu was also there, Hussein ibn Ali. And Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. So this was a very blessed occasion, and Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu was with them as well. Now, when Muawiyah radiallahu anhu passed away, and even before that, Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu refused to give bay'ah to Yazid. So when Yazid, everybody gave bay'ah to him except a few people. One was Abdullah ibn Zubayr and Hussein radiallahu anhu. Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Umar, and the others, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, all of the remaining great Sahaba, even they gave bay'ah. And the reason they gave bay'ah is that they felt that it's not something that they could deal with, it's not something that they could challenge, and we'd rather work with the unity, and they felt that that was the better approach. This was each of their discretion of what they wanted to do, and they felt that that was the better approach. But Hussein radiallahu an and Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu an decided that no, this is something that's not acceptable. So they refused, and they kept back, whereas the others did give bay'ah to Yazid. Now what happens is, Yazid is very adamant that since everybody else has now refreshed or made sure they maintained their pledge, the only people who hadn't were these two. So the rest of the people of Hijaz pretty much did it, but these two didn't. And Yazid was hell-bent on making sure that he had them give the pledge, or they would be killed, or something would happen. So initially, he tried to do it diplomatically in different ways. First, he sent him a letter to Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu. Now, Hussein radiallahu anhu, we've already discussed. But Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, he sent him a letter saying, you've got this special position with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you had a special position in Islam, your piety and so on and so forth. And he explained all of those things. And he said, look, just give the bay'ah, keep it unified, don't go against it, and don't destroy the unity of the Muslims. So he used that perspective. Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu refused. He said no. At that time, he refused. Now they knew that they were going to be sought after. So that's why both of them had gone to Makkah Mukarramah. Because at the end of the day, that's where the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. And they said, we're going to take refuge there. Who's going to attack Makkah? But apparently, the enemies could not stand, they would not stay back. So initially, that's what Yazid tried. Now, when he got that response from Abdullah ibn Zubayr that he refused, he got very angry, and he said, now I will only accept him if he comes to me in shackles. So if he now decides that he's going to give me bay'ah and pledge, then he's going to have to come to me in shackles. So he took an oath. Marwan felt for Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, so he sent him a letter, a really nice letter saying, no, actually he didn't send, he sent his son. He sent his son Abdul Aziz. Now Marwan's son Abdul Aziz ibn Marwan was one of the best in terms of later times, when he became the Amir of Egypt for 20 years. He was one of the best of the Marwanids as such. Extremely pious person who used to like to listen to Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu's lectures, and he was very interested in that. Very pious man, extremely generous. Allah had given him a lot of wealth, and he would just spend it in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on different people. Abdul Aziz ibn Marwan. This is the brother of Walid ibn Marwan, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, and so on and so forth. But he's the best of them. And you know who he is? He's the father of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. That's Abdul Aziz, the son of Marwan. So Umar ibn Abdul Aziz's father is Abdul Aziz, this same Abdul Aziz. He sent him to Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu to say that, look, just go, and he's lightened his oath for you. Because what Yazid finally did, especially when his son as well, the son of Yazid, Muawiyah the second as such, he liked Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, and he told his father, just break your oath, whatever, but he would refuse to break his oath. But he said, okay, fine. Listening to all of these people, he said, okay, I'll make it lighter. So he sent 10 of the nobles of Sham, that nobility, just to show respect. And he sent a silver chain and golden shackle and a cloak. And he said, look, all I want now is that I just fulfill my oath with you that I had made. So you come to me, put all of this on. You've got these noble people with you, and you can put the cloak on so nobody will know. So it's just between you and I, just to fulfill the oath in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that was what he was going to do. So Marwan had tried to tell him, like, just do it, just finish it off. Let's not cause any problems here. Let's just end it there. He sent a letter through his son. He sent a letter that, Jazakallah khair, thank you very much. He thanked him. He was grateful for it. But he said, no, that's not going to happen. What he did was, he first went and consulted with his mother. His mother was his consultant. He said, what should I do? Should I give bay'ah to them? Or should I just refuse? Now, his mother is extremely old. And you can imagine what mothers would normally say. But this mother was different. This was Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's daughter. She said, Ya bunay, ish kareeman wa mut kareeman. Live nobly and die nobly. O my son, live nobly and die nobly. Don't allow yourself to be overcome by the Banu Umayyah, because they're going to play with you. And death is better and superior to that. She knew the Banu Umayyah, and she knew what may have become of him. She'd seen the history. She was old, over 90. And Abdullah ibn Zubayr was over 60 at this time. Yazid became the Khalif at 60, in the 60th year. And he died in about 65. Stayed for about 4.5 to 5 years. So the 60th year, Abdullah ibn Zubayr was about 60 years old. So many people try to tell Yazid, leave him alone, he's old, just leave him, But anyway, so that's what his mother said. So he came and he refused. Now, among the people who had come to him, with the nobles of Sham, there was one of them was called Ibn Idah. So first Ibn Idah tried to convince him by showing him great honor and respect and mentioning his virtues, that, oh, you're great, you're this, you're that, you've done this is your accomplishment and so on. Just leave this alone, let this go, this is the best way, and so on and so forth. So when he may have asked him for a few days, he consulted his mother, he may have consulted others as well. And when he came back, he said, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. So now they changed their tactic. Now he became ugly. And what this Ibn Idah said, he began to give him a warning. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr said, look, I'm just like a dove, a pigeon of the haram. Look at these pigeons, I'm just like one of those. I'm here, I'm in a sanctuary, just consider me like one of them. So what this man did, Ibn Idah, he said, bring my bow and arrows. So they were brought. He put an arrow into the bow, and he pointed it, he directed it at one of the birds, one of the doves there, pigeons, and he began to speak to it, saying to it that, so you would say that Yazid drinks, right? Say, bird, yes, and I will shoot you. I'll shoot this arrow at you. You'll say that you're going to release the pledge that you've given to Yazid, or you will not give your pledge to Yazid. Just say that and I will shoot you. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu is looking at this whole thing, and obviously this man is trying to create this scenario to frighten Abdullah ibn Zubayr. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu said, woe unto you, the bird doesn't speak. So then he turns around to Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Ibn Idah, and says, well, you do speak. And you better give the pledge. Otherwise, you will see the flag of the Ash'ariyin in this valley, you will see the flag approach this valley, and we will fight with you. Even if you enter into the Kaaba, we will bring it down or we will burn it. And so Ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu just said it very clearly that the pledge of Yazid is not on my neck. Which basically, as a literal translation, is that I have nothing to do with giving pledge to Yazid. He just said it clearly to him, even after all of that. And then Ibn Zubayr then got very angry and began to just say very loudly at him that, yeah, I've heard that Yazid wakes up in the morning drunk, and he's drunk at night, in the evening as well. And he just started saying all of these things about Yazid. And he said that I'm doing this through absolute proof from my Lord, in the sense that I know why I'm doing this, and I feel confident that it is the right thing for me to do in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you know what? If I'm killed, then it's better for me anyway. So I don't mind if I'm to be killed. And all the people of Makkah that was there, they said the same thing. They said the same thing. So basically it's as though they released their bay'ah that they had given earlier on. And he named himself, Ibn Zubayr named himself A'idhullah. A'idh from A'udhu. A'idh means the one who seeks refuge. So the one who has sought refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he said, Allahumma inni a'idhum bi baytik. Oh Allah, I'm seeking refuge with your house, or in your house. So that was his dua. So these people, they returned. Now Yazid, he tells the governor of Medina to now attack. And the strange thing here is that his brother is Amr ibn Zubayr ibn al-Awam, and they did not see eye to eye, and great enmity for him. In fact, anybody that would say anything good about Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu an, this Amr ibn Zubayr would trouble them and would harass them. So he is made the person to go and take on his brother as well. So it's kind of strange that he had they were outside, they had besieged Makkah, and they'd sent two armies. Two armies had been sent. One from the south, and one was with Amr ibn Zubayr. They used to meet, Amr ibn Zubayr used to meet in the haram afterwards with Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Abdullah ibn Zubayr used to act very nicely with him and everything. And he used to say that, okay, talk to Yazid or whatever. So he was trying to buy time, or I'm not sure exactly what he was doing, but Abdullah ibn Zubayr was, at the end of the day, he was also very shrewd. So what he had done is he'd already sent a small contingent against the contingent that was coming in from the south. And he had killed their leader and taken over that area. Amr didn't know that. And then he did the same thing on this side, and Amr was captured. And then Amr was put in front of everybody, and because he used to harass everybody, he tried to take refuge with another brother of theirs. So the other brother went and told Abdullah, his other brother, that I've given him refuge. And in those days, you give somebody refuge, then they're protected. He said, fine, I'll give him refuge from me. So I won't do anything to him. But because he's harassed so many people, I can't let that off. So we're going to make him stand here, and anybody who comes and makes a complaint, then they can avenge whatever he's been doing to them. So in that, he was beaten badly. Because everybody, whoever he had harassed, they came and they really struck him. And then, see, the story is still very long yet. We're nowhere near the end. And we're not going to do the whole thing today anyway. Right? Because it's very detailed. You can just gloss over it if you want to, but we're doing it in detail. So, after these two armies were defeated, the two small groups that were sent, they were defeated, the people now gave bay'ah to Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Now, in the middle of that, this lasted for a few months, until Rabiul Awwal. They'd come in Muharram, I believe. Safar, Rabiul Awwal. Rabiul Akhir, they'd started this attack in Rabiul Awwal. Rabiul Akhir was when Rabiul Awwal was when Yazid had died. Yazid was very young when he died, 35, 45, something like that. And the news hadn't reached these people yet from Sham, because these guys were busy. Eventually when the news reached them, the other leader, he's trying to talk to Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, that look, Yazid is dead, right? Yazid is dead. You come with me. Now, this was a person who was against, he was fighting against Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu. One thing that I missed out was, in Medina Munawwara, the governor at that time was, when they were still there, Walid ibn Utbah ibn Abi Sufyan. So this was Abu Sufyan's nephew. This was Muawiyah radiallahu anhu's nephew. So he's an Umayyad. Walid ibn Utbah ibn Abi Sufyan. So Utbah was the brother of Muawiyah, and this Walid was his son. Very nice man. And although he was told by Yazid to deal with Hussein radiallahu anhu and Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, he talked to them, but then he said, there's no way he was told to deal with them, like put them in prison and the works. He said, there's no way I'm going to do anything to them. How can I? This is the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's no way that I can have that to my name. So he was very soft on them, very lenient on them. But they must have seen that it wasn't going to work out there, so that's why they had gone to Makkah Mukarramah. So now this other person, who's at the head of one of the armies, one of the two, the other one was killed. The Amr ibn was the chief of police, but the main leader, when he saw that Yazid had died, he said that I'm going to meet you in Batha to Abdullah ibn Zubayr. So he got there. Now he's speaking to him in whispers, and Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu is speaking loudly back to him. And this man is saying to him that, look, Yazid is gone, right? You are now the most rightful and entitled to this position. Until now you'd been fighting with him, right? But now that Yazid was dead, and they'd kind of suffered a kind of a defeat anyway, he said, you're the most rightful person. You come back with me to Damascus, and I'll have everybody will pledge their allegiance to you, and it'll all be done and dusted. So he mentioned a few things like that to him, and Abdullah ibn Zubayr was just getting very angry at him and speaking loudly at him. So he's saying, what kind of a person are you? I'm talking to you silently so nobody else hears, so it's not embarrassing. And that's the way, and you speak back loudly to me. But Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu couldn't see what he was saying. He couldn't see that it was going to be a workable thing. Although then, he said, okay, fine, I'm going to go back to Damascus. Then when Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu left, now, in the midst of all of this, he'd lost many of his close consultants. They died. In the midst of this siege, they'd been killed. So, after a while, he felt that maybe he shouldn't have done that, maybe he could have taken that. So he tried to speak to him, but then one of the reasons why he could not agree is because at the end of the day, these were Umayyads there. And for many of them, it was a family thing. So it wasn't going to work out, and he just didn't see it work, even though it seemed like a great proposal. That, okay, you come back with me, and believe me, all of them, because we're nobles, I will be able to convince all of them, they'll be willing to accept you. But he just couldn't see how that could happen. Until now, they've been just Umayyads. How are they going to accept this? So until now, the Khilafah had gone, the rule had gone to the Sufyanis as such. Abu Sufyan, Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, Yazid, his son Muawiyah again. And if you remember, I mentioned how Muawiyah had given it up. The second Muawiyah had given it up, he just couldn't agree to it. So now Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu becomes the Khalif on this side. And pretty much Iraq, Yemen, all of these areas, they accept him. And they take the pledge with him. Even it says that majority of the Shamis also did so. Including Marwan wanted to go, he was getting ready to go and take the pledge as well with him. But it was a small group of die-hard Umayyads. As you would say today, you got all this group of neocons, right? All they're worried about is one thing. We're not equating the two. These guys are a lot more khabith. There's no doubt about that, right? Those guys were Muslim. So, there's a big difference. But these were Umayyads, and there's no way that it can come out of the Umayyads. So they convinced Marwan that, no, that's not going to happen, and they took the pledge with him. So then it went to the Marwanis. They were both from the same family, but it was just a subdivision. So that's on that side though. Here Abdullah ibn Zubayr for 9 years and some months is the Khalif. Except a small group of people that have got Marwan, and then Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. And then it moves on. But we'll have to stop here. Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam tabarak ya dhal jalali wal ikram. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين جزا الله عنا محمدا ما هو أهله اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وعافنا واهدنا وارزقنا اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الهم والحزن والبخل والجبن والكبر والسحر والمعاصي اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من غلبة الدين وقهر الرجال اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الجنون والجذام والبرص وسيء الأسقام اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من كل الفتن من فتنة المسيح الدجال من فتنة المحيا والممات اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من فتنة المحيا والممات اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الحول بعد الكور اللهم ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا إنك جامع الناس ليوم لا ريب فيه إن الله لا يخلف الميعاد اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وعافنا واهدنا وارزقنا اللهم اغفر لأمة سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم رب زدنا علما نافعا ورزقا واسعا وعملا متقبلا وشفاء من كل داء اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من علم لا ينفع وقلب لا يخشع ونفس لا تشبع وعين لا تدمع ودعاء لا يستجاب له سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. The point of a lecture is to encourage people to act, to get further, an inspiration, an encouragement, persuasion. The next step is to actually start learning seriously, to read books, to take on a subject of Islam and to understand all the subjects of Islam, at least at their basic level, so that we can become more aware of what our deen wants from us. And that's why we started Rayyan courses, so that you can actually take organized lectures on demand whenever you have free time, especially, for example, the Islamic Essentials course that we have on there, the Islamic Essentials Certificate, which you take 20 short modules, and at the end of that, inshallah, you will have gotten the basics of most of the most important topics in Islam, and you'll feel a lot more confident. You don't have to leave lectures behind. You can continue to leave, to listen to lectures, but you need to have this more sustained study as well. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.